Our worldview is important in how we view and understand what happens in our lives. If we simply live for the here and now, it would be difficult to make sense of all that is going on in the world, and suffering in particular. But if we live in light of the hereafter, it will help us to see this life in a much bigger context. Now, that's how Paul lived, and we will read about it in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 15 to 18. For all things are for your sakes, that the abundant grace might through the thanksgiving of many redound to the glory of God. For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. You ever looked at someone, maybe someone who's always on the go, always active, always doing some project, and wondered, where do they get their energy from? We could certainly ask that question of the Apostle Paul. For the second time in this chapter, he writes, we faint not, verse 1 and verse 16. And it underlines that Paul was not worn down by the difficulties of his service. Although those difficulties affected his physical body, they did not have that same wearying effect upon his spirit. Though the outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day, also verse 16. The mortal body might have been wasting away, but the immortal spirit was being renewed. He might have been a pitiful sight outwardly on the exterior, but that belied the invigoration of Paul's spirit internally. Paul experienced the power of Christ renewing him day by day because he kept in touch with God through daily communion and fellowship, something that perhaps I or we neglect. Now, what did that enable him to do? Keeping in touch with the eternal gave Paul an eternal worldview. He looked upon things from God's point of view. That enabled him to put things in a proper perspective, just as Asaph had done. I went into the sanctuary of God, then understood I their end. Psalm 73, verse 17. And Moses before him, he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 27. Paul considered that what he suffered in his earthly life was little compared to the glory that would follow in eternity. So he didn't focus on what was visible and temporary, but on what was invisible and permanent. To Paul, temporal things were temporary, our light affliction, which is but for a moment in verse 17. And eternal things were permanent. In the following chapter, we will read about what is eternal in the heavens, chapter 5, verse 1. Paul gave greater weight to things that he could not see than to things that he could see. The things which are seen are temporal, that is temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal, verse 18. I'm not so sure that I can really say that with honesty. Now, here's another wonderful thing about Paul's view of his circumstances. It is seen in a number of contrasts that he makes. There is light in contrast to weight. There is affliction in contrast to glory. And there is moment in contrast to eternal. When he uses the words far more exceeding in verse 17, he's not making a comparison, but a contrast. The eternal result is out of all proportion to the temporary effort. As he writes elsewhere, I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Romans chapter 8, verse 18. Paul saw that all these challenges were not working against him, but for him. Notice the words, worketh for us, in verse 18. How wonderful it would be if we could have the same view about the challenges that we face in our Christian lives.